I would say that anything is possible and, to dream big. I think me as a person, I'm very ambitious
To
and
think that I make a difference, that's what the only thing I can do to give back to my country is to help inspire.
Congratulations on your win. What is the key for your rhythm and consistency? And I would like to know if you have a ritual or a specific preparation before you go on court.
Breaking, the Eala doping scandal that shocked tennis. Coach demands test after impossible comeback, full story revealed. Welcome back to Court Vision Plus, your ultimate destination for the most explosive, unfiltered, and jaw-dropping tennis news that the mainstream media is too scared to touch. If you thought you'd seen everything the WTA Tour had to offer, think again, because what just transpired in Abu Dhabi isn't merely a tennis match. This is a full-blown scandal, a conspiracy theory come to life, and a controversy so intense that it has left officials scrambling, coaches fuming, and an entire nation holding its breath. We're diving headfirst into a story that has everything: a miraculous comeback, accusations of cheating, emergency meetings behind closed doors, and a test result that left everyone absolutely speechless. Today we're talking about Eala, the 20-year-old Filipino sensation who has been setting the tennis world on fire. We're talking about Alexandra Sasnovich, the battle-hardened Belarusian veteran who thought she had an easy win in the bag. And most importantly, we're talking about what happened immediately after their second-round showdown at the prestigious Mubadala Abu Dhabi Open, a confrontation so heated and unprecedented that it threatened to overshadow the entire tournament. Picture this: a furious coaching staff marching into the tournament referee's office, refusing to leave until they got answers. An emergency demand for an immediate doping test because they simply could not believe what they had just witnessed on the court. Allegations that a player's performance was so extraordinary, so superhuman, that it had to be chemically enhanced. And then, the results that dropped like a bombshell, leaving accusers stunned and the entire tennis community in absolute shock. You've witnessed epic comebacks before. You've seen players dig deep and find that extra gear when everything seems lost. But have you ever seen a comeback so spectacular, so physically impossible looking, that the opponent's entire team literally refused to accept it was natural? That's exactly what we're dealing with here, folks. This isn't hyperbole. This isn't clickbait. This is the real deal, and it went down in the corridors and back rooms of the Zayed Sports City, away from the cameras, away from the cheering crowds, and a drama that rivals anything Hollywood could script. Right now, we're going deep into the trenches. We're breaking down every single moment of the match that started this firestorm, examining the precise instant when the so-called suspicious surge occurred, dissecting the heated confrontation that erupted backstage, and revealing the explosive test results that arrived just hours before the quarterfinals were set to begin. Plus, we've got the latest updates on what happened next, including Eala's heartbreaking follow-up match against the powerful Ekaterina Alexandrova. Was the young Filipino star too emotionally drained by the accusations to compete at her best? Did the weight of defending her integrity take a toll that no amount of physical training could prepare her for? We're answering all these questions and more. So grab your favorite snack, settle in, and make sure you hit that subscribe button right now, because this is the story that has everyone talking, the story that exposes the dark underbelly of competitive tennis, and the story that proves Eala is no longer just a rising star but a force so dominant that her opponents think she must be superhuman. Let's get into the nitty-gritty details of what really happened in Abu Dhabi. To truly understand why this accusation sent shockwaves through the tennis world, we need to set the stage properly. The 2026 Mubadala Abu Dhabi Open is not some small-time exhibition event. This is a premier WTA 500 tournament, featuring prize money in the millions and ranking points that can make or break a player's season. The field was absolutely stacked with talent. You had former Grand Slam champions, top 10 mainstays, and hungry young prospects all battling for supremacy on the hard courts of the United Arab Emirates. Names like Elena Rybakina and Daria Kasatkina headlined the draw, making this one of the most competitive early-season events on the calendar. And then there's Eala. At just 20 years old, the pride of the Philippines has been turning heads all season long. She's no longer the promising junior champion people whisper about in hushed tones. She's a legitimate contender, a player who has proven she can hang with and defeat top 50 opponents on any given day. Her game is built on speed, precision, and an unwavering competitive spirit that has endeared her to millions of fans across Asia and beyond. Every time she steps onto the court, she carries the hopes and dreams of an entire nation on her shoulders, and she's been handling that pressure with remarkable maturity and grace. But coming into her second round encounter with Eala Sasnovich, Eala was still considered the underdog in terms of pure experience. Sasnovich is a crafty veteran who has been competing on the WTA Tour for over a decade. She's seen it all, done it all, and knows every trick in the book when it comes to dismantling younger, less experienced opponents. The Belarusian has a reputation for being a tough out, someone who makes you earn every single point, someone who can grind you down both physically and mentally until you're begging for the match to end. Her heavy ground strokes and excellent court positioning make her a nightmare to play against, especially for players who haven't yet developed the mental fortitude to withstand her relentless pressure. The match began exactly as the experts and pundits predicted. Sasnovich came out firing on all cylinders, immediately imposing her will on the younger player. She was painting the lines with surgical precision, moving Eala from corner to corner like a puppet on strings, and generally making the Filipino star look like she didn't belong on the same court. The first set was an absolute masterclass in veteran dominance. Sasnovich took it convincingly, 6-2, making it look almost effortless. Eala looked completely out of sorts. Her footwork was off, her timing was suspect, and she appeared almost lethargic in her movements. She looked like a player who had stayed up too late the night before, a player who was mentally checked out before the match even reached its conclusion. It seemed like we were witnessing a routine demolition, the kind of straight sets beatdown that happens dozens of times every tournament when a wily veteran faces an overeager youngster. But then something shifted in the second set. Eala started to find her range. She began reading Sasnovich's patterns better, anticipating where the Belarusian would place her shots. More importantly, she started engaging with the crowd, feeding off their energy in a way that transformed the entire atmosphere inside the stadium. And let's take a moment to talk about that crowd, because the Filipino contingent in Abu Dhabi is absolutely legendary. They don't just watch tennis matches, they participate in them. They chant, they sing, they wave flags, and they create an energy that can lift their player to heights they didn't know they could reach. When Eala started pumping her fist and encouraging them to get louder, the stadium transformed into a cauldron of noise and passion that would have intimidated even the most experienced players. Eala clawed her way back into the match, refusing to go away quietly. She broke Sasnovich's serve, consolidated the break, and suddenly the momentum had completely swung. The Filipino star took the second set 6-4, leveling the match and forcing a decisive third set. The crowd was absolutely electric, standing and roaring their approval as Eala walked to her chair, finally showing the kind of fight and determination everyone knew she possessed. Okay, so far this is standard tennis fare, right? A veteran gets off to a hot start, the younger player fights back, and we're heading to a third set showdown to determine who advances. Nothing particularly unusual yet, just good competitive tennis between two players refusing to surrender. But this is precisely where our story takes a sharp turn into territory that defies conventional explanation. This is where the controversy begins. This is where the accusations of abnormality originate. The third set began with Sasnovich clearly deciding she had allowed this match to get far too close for comfort. She was not going to let some young upstart ruin her tournament. She stepped on the gas pedal with authority, raising her level to heights she hadn't reached in the first two sets. She broke Eala's serve immediately. Then she held her own service game comfortably. Then she broke Eala again, this time with brutal efficiency. Before anyone in the stadium could even process what was happening, before Eala's coaching staff could call for a medical timeout or offer any strategic advice, Eala Sasnovich had raced out to a commanding 4-0 lead in the deciding set. 4-0 in a third set. Let that sink in for a moment. In professional tennis, that scoreline in a final set is essentially a death sentence. The statistics are absolutely brutal. When a player goes down 4-love in a deciding set against a top 100 opponent, they win the match less than 1% of the time. It's not impossible, but it's so improbable that bookmakers essentially pay out bets at that point. Eala's body language reflected this reality. Her shoulders were starting to slump ever so slightly. The fire that had burned so brightly in the second set seemed to be flickering out. The crowd, so raucous just minutes earlier, had gone eerily quiet, as if collectively mourning the end of their hero's tournament run. Over in the Sasnovich player box, the atmosphere was completely different. Her coach was visibly relaxed, leaning back in his chair with the posture of someone who had already mentally moved on to preparing for the next match. They were thinking about the quarterfinals. They were thinking about who they might face next. They were probably thinking about what restaurant they'd celebrate at that evening. The match, for all intents and purposes, was over. Eala had fought valiantly, but experience and consistency had won out, as it so often does in professional sports. And then, something happened that nobody in that stadium, nobody watching on television, and certainly nobody in the Sasnovich camp could have predicted or prepared for. Eala transformed before everyone's eyes. According to multiple sources close to the situation, sources who later formed the basis of the explosive complaint that would be filed after the match, this specific moment, this transition from 4-love down to what came next, represents the crux of the entire controversy. This is the sequence of events that the Sasnovich coaching staff would later describe as impossible, unnatural, and deeply suspicious. It wasn't simply that Eala started playing better tennis. Every player has moments where they elevate their game, where they find an extra gear through sheer willpower and determination. That's the beauty of sports. But what witnesses claimed they saw in those next several games went beyond normal competitive excellence. They described a sudden, jarring, almost eerie shift in Eala's entire physical output that seemed to defy the basic laws of physiology and human endurance. Remember, at this point in the match, Eala had been on court for nearly 2 full hours. She had spent that time running from corner to corner, lunging for drop shots, sliding into defensive positions, and generally expending enormous amounts of energy trying to keep pace with Sasnovich's heavy ground strokes. By all reasonable expectations, she should have been hitting the wall right about now. Her legs should have been heavy. Her shot should have been losing pace. Her movement should have been getting slower and more labored with each passing game. That's what happens to human beings when they push their bodies to the limit. Fatigue sets in. Muscles burn. Reaction time slow. It's inevitable. But instead of wilting under the physical and mental pressure of being 4-love down in a third set, Eala suddenly looked like she had just walked onto the court after a full week of rest and recovery. Her footwork, which had looked heavy and plodding at the end of the second set, became lightning quick and precise. Her ground strokes, which should have been losing velocity, were instead gaining pace, the ball exploding off her racket with violent intent. And most noticeably to everyone watching, her movement between points, the way she walked back to the baseline, the way she bounced on her toes waiting to receive serve, all suggested a player who was completely fresh, whose energy reserves were somehow completely replenished. Eala held serve to make it 4-1. Okay, perhaps she was just playing a solid service game, buying herself one more game before the inevitable conclusion. Nothing too alarming yet. Then she broke Sasnovich's serve, and suddenly it was 4-2. Now the Belarusian looked slightly annoyed, perhaps frustrated that she couldn't close out what should have been a routine finish, but she certainly wasn't worried. She had been in this position hundreds of times in her career. Players always make one last desperate push before succumbing to defeat. She just needed to hold serve and the pressure would be right back on Eala's shoulders. But Eala held again, and now it was 4-3, and the tension inside that stadium had ratcheted up to almost unbearable levels. The Filipino fans, who had been preparing to console themselves with moral victory speeches about how bravely their girl had fought, were suddenly back on their feet, screaming themselves hoarse, willing every single ball to land inside the lines. The momentum had swung completely, and Sasnovich could feel it slipping away from her with each passing point. However, it was one specific point, one particular exchange during that 4-3 game, that triggered absolute alarm bells in the Sasnovich player box. It was the moment that would later be cited as primary evidence in the formal complaint about abnormal physical performance. Sasnovich, trying desperately to stop the bleeding and regain control of the match, executed what should have been a match-saving shot. She hit a perfect drop shot, one of those delicate, dying balls that barely clears the net and then dies on the court surface with almost no bounce whatsoever. It was a textbook example of touch and feel, the kind of shot that should have been an outright winner. Eala was positioned miles behind the baseline when Sasnovich made contact with the ball. She was in a defensive position, having just been pushed back by a deep, heavy ground stroke. By every conventional measure of physics, geometry, and human athletic capability, there was simply no way she should have been able to reach that drop shot. The distance was too great. The time was too short. She had been moving in the wrong direction. It should have been a clean winner for Sasnovich, the kind of shot that breaks an opponent's spirit and turns momentum back in your favor. But Eala didn't just reach the ball. What happened next was described by multiple courtside observers, including journalists and even neutral fans, as one of the most explosive displays of speed and athleticism they had ever witnessed on a tennis court. Eala exploded forward with a burst of acceleration that looked like a world-class sprinter coming out of the blocks at the Olympics. She absolutely devoured the distance between herself and the net, her legs pumping with mechanical efficiency, her eyes locked onto that dying ball with laser focus. She slid into the shot with perfect timing and technique, somehow maintaining complete balance despite the desperate nature of the retrieval, and flicked the ball down the line with pinpoint precision. The shot landed right on the baseline, kissing the line with impossible accuracy, leaving Sasnovich frozen in place, unable to even attempt a response. The crowd went absolutely ballistic. It was the kind of point that gets replayed on highlight reels for years, the kind of moment that defines careers and becomes part of tennis folklore. But over in the Sasnovich player box, the reaction was completely different. The coach sat bolt upright in his chair, his relaxed posture replaced by rigid tension. He looked at Sasnovich with an expression that witnesses later described as a mixture of disbelief and suspicion. Sasnovich, standing on the court, looked directly back at her coach with wide eyes, and some lip readers later claimed she mouthed something along the lines of "How is that possible?" The seeds of doubt, suspicion, and eventually accusation had been planted in that single exchange. The comeback continued with relentless momentum. Eala broke serve again to level the match at 4-all. Then she held to go ahead 5-4, putting herself just one game away from completing one of the most improbable comebacks in recent WTA history. The stadium was shaking with noise, the Filipino contingent creating an atmosphere that felt more like a sold-out football match than a tennis tournament. But even as the crowd celebrated and Eala pumped her fists in triumph, the Sasnovich camp was watching with growing alarm and suspicion. They were paying attention to things the casual fan wouldn't notice. They were watching how Eala sprinted between points without showing any signs of heavy breathing. They were observing how her ground strokes, which should have been losing pace after 3 hours of brutal tennis, were instead maintaining or even increasing their velocity. They were noting how her eyes appeared unusually dilated, how her movements seemed almost hyperactive between points, bouncing and fidgeting with energy that seemed impossible given the circumstances. Sasnovich, meanwhile, was visibly wilting under the pressure and the physical toll of the match. She was gasping for air after long rallies. Her legs looked heavy as she trudged back to her position after each point. She was displaying all the normal, expected symptoms of human fatigue after hours of intense physical competition. She was experiencing what every tennis player experiences in the late stages of a brutal 3-set match: exhaustion, muscle burn, mental fog, and the desperate desire for it all to just be over. But Eala was bouncing. Eala was moving. Eala looked like she could play another 3 hours without breaking a sweat. The match inevitably reached a third-set tiebreaker, winner-take-all, with everything on the line. Even there, facing match point against her, staring down the barrel of elimination after coming all the way back from the brink of defeat, Eala did not flinch. She didn't show even a hint of fear or hesitation. When Sasnovich thought she had finally closed the door with a well-placed approach shot, Eala came up with a fearless, perfectly executed drive volley that left the Belarusian shaking her head in frustrated disbelief. The young Filipino saved match point with pure audacity and skill, then closed out the tiebreaker 7-5, completing one of the most miraculous comebacks the tour had seen all season. The stadium absolutely erupted in pandemonium. Fans were jumping up and down, hugging strangers, waving Philippine flags with tears streaming down their faces. Eala collapsed to her knees on the court, covering her face with her hands and screaming in triumph and relief. It was the comeback of the year, possibly the comeback of her entire career to that point. A 4-love deficit in a deciding set, completely erased. A match point saved with nerves of steel. A victory for the ages, the kind of win that defines a player's journey from prospect to legitimate contender. While Eala was signing autographs, posing for selfies, and soaking in the adulation of her adoring fans, something dark and ugly was already brewing behind the scenes, away from the cameras and the celebration. This is the part of the story that the television broadcasts didn't show you. This is the explosive development that has sent shockwaves through the entire tour and raised serious questions about sportsmanship, protocol, and how far a team will go when they simply cannot accept defeat. According to multiple sources with direct knowledge of the situation, sources who spoke on condition of anonymity due to the sensitive nature of the allegations, immediately after the mandatory handshake at the net, which was notably frosty and perfunctory from the Sasnovich side, something unprecedented occurred. Sasnovich's coach didn't follow the normal post-match routine. He didn't pack up his bags. He didn't head back to the hotel to regroup and prepare for the next tournament. Instead, he marched directly to the tournament referee's office with a sense of urgency and barely contained fury that left everyone who witnessed it absolutely stunned. The coach was described by multiple witnesses as visibly agitated, his face flushed with anger and indignation. He reportedly demanded an immediate meeting with the head tournament referee and the WTA supervisor on duty, refusing to leave until his concerns were heard and addressed. When officials tried to suggest he file a formal complaint through normal channels and return the following day, he allegedly became more insistent, stating that what he had just witnessed required immediate action and that every moment of delay could compromise the integrity of the tournament. The complaint he filed was as bold as it was insulting to Eala. The Sasnovich coaching staff formally requested an immediate, targeted, emergency doping test specifically for the Filipino player. Not a random test. Not a standard post-match protocol. A direct, accusatory demand based solely on their belief that what they had just witnessed on the court could not possibly have been achieved through natural means. The reasoning they provided in their formal written complaint was shockingly specific and detailed. They alleged that Eala's sudden physical transformation in the third set, her abnormal speed and acceleration, the dramatic surge in energy levels after more than 2 hours of intense competition, were simply not consistent with natural human physiological capabilities. They pointed to video footage of that crucial drop shot retrieval at 4-3, arguing that no player, regardless of fitness level, could cover that much ground that quickly after playing for that long without chemical assistance. They noted her lack of heavy breathing during the tiebreaker, her unusually dilated pupils when shown on the big screen, and her almost manic energy between points in the final stages of the match. In essence, the Sasnovich camp was formally accusing the 20-year-old Filipino sensation of using a performance-enhancing stimulant to gain an unfair advantage during those critical final moments of the match. They were arguing that Eala hadn't beaten them through skill, determination, and mental fortitude. They were claiming she had beaten them through cheating, through banned substances, through artificial enhancement that gave her abilities beyond what a clean athlete could achieve. It was an extraordinarily heavy accusation to make, especially in the immediate aftermath of a loss. In the world of professional tennis, doping allegations are the ultimate nuclear option. They destroy reputations instantly. They cast shadows that never fully disappear, even when proven false. They can end careers, ruin sponsorship deals, and turn public opinion against a player faster than any on-court failure ever could. The fact that a veteran coaching staff would deploy this weapon against a young rising star, directly after a heartbreaking loss, speaks volumes about either the depth of their bitterness and inability to accept defeat, or perhaps their genuine, sincere disbelief at what they had just witnessed. Tournament officials were reportedly completely blindsided by the request. Standard doping protocols in professional tennis are typically either random selections or scheduled tests that are part of normal tour operations. An emergency demand for an immediate targeted test based solely on a coach's post-match suspicions is extraordinarily rare and highly controversial from both procedural and ethical standpoints. It creates an incredibly hostile environment. It implies that the opponent's victory wasn't legitimate, that everything they had fought for was a fraud. It poisons the well of sportsmanship that is supposed to underpin competitive athletics. However, the WTA takes integrity and clean competition with absolute seriousness, as they should. With a formal complaint officially lodged by a player's coaching staff, with specific allegations made about suspicious physical performance, the wheels of the anti-doping machinery were immediately set in motion. Officials had no choice but to act, regardless of how uncomfortable or unprecedented the situation might be. Now imagine yourself in Alex Eala's position for just a moment. Put yourself in her shoes. You've just achieved the greatest comeback of your career, maybe the greatest comeback of your life. You've overcome a 4-love deficit that should have been insurmountable. You've saved match point against you. You've completed a victory that felt like destiny, like the universe aligning to reward your determination and refusal to quit. You're still riding the high of adrenaline and triumph, still wiping away tears of joy, still hearing the echoes of thousands of fans chanting your name. You're walking back to the locker room thinking about how you're going to celebrate this incredible moment with your team, your family, your supporters back home in the Philippines. And instead of celebration, you're met by stern-faced officials who inform you that you're being accused of cheating. That your greatest moment of triumph is being questioned. That your integrity as an athlete is under formal investigation. That instead of celebrating, you need to immediately provide a urine sample for emergency drug testing because your opponent's team thinks you couldn't possibly be that good naturally. For most young players, this would be absolutely devastating. It would shatter the joy of victory. It would plant seeds of doubt and insecurity that might never fully heal. Many players would react with anger, with tears, with demands to know who made the accusation and threats of legal action. Some might refuse to cooperate out of principle, arguing that complying with such a baseless accusation gives it legitimacy it doesn't deserve. But this is where Alex Eala showed maturity and class well beyond her 20 years. According to sources familiar with her response, she didn't panic. She didn't make a scene. She didn't break down or lash out in anger at the injustice of having her greatest achievement immediately tarnished. She simply complied with the request calmly and professionally. She provided the required sample immediately, without hesitation, without complaint. She knew in her heart that she had nothing to hide. She knew that her incredible third-set surge wasn't fueled by banned drugs or illegal stimulants. She knew it was fueled by heart, by the warrior mentality that defines Filipino athletes, by the adrenaline rush of a roaring crowd refusing to let her lose, and by the simple fact that she's an extraordinarily talented athlete who had found her absolute best when it mattered most. But even with the confidence of knowing she was clean, even with the certainty that the test would vindicate her completely, there was still the agonizing wait. The sample was collected and sent for immediate expedited analysis, but laboratory testing takes time even when fast-tracked. For the next several hours, a dark cloud hung over the entire tournament. Alex Eala had to sit in her hotel room, unable to fully celebrate, unable to relax, knowing that somewhere in a laboratory, scientists were analyzing her sample looking for evidence that she was a cheater. The Court Vision Plus take on all of this? What happened in Abu Dhabi is just the beginning of Alex Eala's story, not the conclusion. The so-called abnormal speed that caused so much controversy isn't an anomaly or a one-time occurrence. That's her new normal. That's the level she's capable of reaching when everything clicks into place. The rest of the tour better get used to seeing that kind of performance, because she's not slowing down for anyone, and she's certainly not failing any drug tests along the way. Before we wrap this up, let's touch on a few additional updates from the tournament that deserve mention. Despite her singles exit, Alex Eala didn't immediately pack her bags and head home to lick her wounds. She still had commitments in the doubles bracket with her partner Janice Chen, and she honored those commitments despite everything she had been through. The pair actually secured an impressive win in their quarterfinal match, showing that even when physically and emotionally exhausted, Eala remains a dangerous player at the net with excellent doubles instincts. They eventually bowed out in the semifinals, but the partnership showed real promise and suggests that Eala could have a future as a legitimate doubles threat in addition to her singles success. There are also whispers coming out of WTA circles that league officials might be looking into the conduct of the Sasnovich coaching staff regarding the emergency test demand. Apparently, there are rules and protocols about frivolous or bad faith accusations, and filing a doping complaint that turns out to be completely baseless can potentially lead to fines for unsportsmanlike conduct or bringing the sport into disrepute. We'll be keeping our eyes and ears open for any developments on that front. If Sasnovich's coach ends up getting slapped with a hefty fine for his actions, you can bet we'll cover it right here on Court Vision Plus. The broader implications of this story extend beyond just one match or one tournament. This incident raises important questions about the culture of professional tennis and how we handle situations where performance seems too good to be true. Should coaches be allowed to demand emergency doping tests based purely on their subjective assessment of an opponent's physical capabilities? Does that open the door for harassment and bad faith accusations designed to rattle young players? Or is it a necessary safeguard to ensure that suspicions can be investigated quickly before evidence disappears? These are complex questions without easy answers, but what seems clear is that the current system, which allowed Eala to be put through this ordeal based on nothing more than a coach's inability to accept defeat, needs serious examination. Clean athletes shouldn't have their greatest achievements immediately tarnished by baseless accusations from bitter opponents. There needs to be some threshold of actual evidence or reasonable suspicion before someone's integrity can be called into question so publicly and dramatically. Now it's time to hear from you, the Court Vision Plus community, because your opinions matter and we want to get a real debate going in the comments section. What do you think about the Sasnovich coach's reaction to that match? Was his demand for emergency doping testing a legitimate concern given the sudden and dramatic change in momentum, or was it just a salty, disrespectful move designed to rattle a young player who had just achieved something extraordinary? Do you think there should be consequences for coaches who make false accusations, or should they have complete freedom to raise concerns no matter how baseless they might turn out to be? And what about Eala's performance in that third set? Is that 4-love comeback the best match of her career so far, or have you seen her do something even more impressive? How far do you think she can go in the sport if she continues developing at this pace? Could we be looking at a future Grand Slam champion, or are we getting ahead of ourselves? Drop all your thoughts, opinions, hot takes, and reactions in the comments section below. We read every single comment and we love engaging with you all. Let's get a real conversation going about the bigger issues this story raises. Should there be stricter rules about when and how doping accusations can be made? Does the current system adequately protect clean athletes from harassment? Let us know where you stand. If you enjoyed this extensive deep dive into the Abu Dhabi drama, if you appreciated us taking the time to give you the full story with all the context and details that other outlets are too scared to touch, then do us a huge favor and smash that like button. It genuinely helps the channel grow and lets YouTube know that this is the kind of in-depth, no-holds-barred tennis coverage that people want to see. Every single like makes a difference and we appreciate each and every one of you who takes the time to hit that button. And if you haven't already subscribed to Court Vision Plus, what are you waiting for? We don't just report the scores and move on. We tell you the real stories behind the matches, the drama that happens away from the cameras, the controversies that the mainstream tennis media is too polite or too scared to address. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss another upload. We've got so much more explosive content coming your way, and you're not going to want to miss a single episode. This is Court Vision Plus, your home for unfiltered tennis truth, signing off. Until next time, keep your rackets ready and your eyes open, because in the world of professional tennis, you never know when the next scandal is going to break. We'll see you on the next one.